One of the deadliest attacks in Somalia's capital in recent memory. Dozens killed as a car bomb explodes during the morning rush hour. Almost 250,000 Syrians flee their homes as government bombing in rebel-held Idlib intensifies. Aid workers warn it could lead to one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes in the country's civil war. And 130 years on from the birth of Charlie Chaplin, we take a look at the forgotten musical genius of the world's best-known funny man. You're watching France 24. Good to have you with us. I'm Naomi Lloyd. Our top story, more than 60 people have been killed after a car bomb exploded at a busy security checkpoint in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Officials say the death toll is expected to rise. The blast targeted a tax collection centre during the morning rush hour as Somalians returned to work after the weekend. More than 50 others were wounded, including children, and rushed to hospitals, amongst them several university students who'd been travelling in a bus. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the bomb, but al-Shabaab militants have often carried out attacks there. Almost 250,000 Syrians have been forced to flee their homes in the last 2 weeks. It comes as Syrian government forces, backed by Russia, have been stepping up airstrikes and shelling on the rebel-held Idlib province. The latest figures confirmed by the United Nations. Tens of thousands of families, many already displaced numerous times during the civil war, have been heading north in trucks and private cars. Jean-Emile Jamin has the latest.
A tent with mattresses on the ground. The place where this Syrian woman and her 5 children have had to settle. A few days ago, they escaped the bombing in their town south of Idlib. Having left in a rush, the family is now calling for help.
We cannot live in tents. We left our homes and fled the bombing. We need help. All our things are on the floor and there is heavy rain. We need heating.
Like this family, many have had to set up their tents in this camp in the north of Idlib. Since mid-December, regime forces backed by Moscow have intensified their bombing further south in the city. Their objective? To take back this region from the grasp of jihadists, despite a ceasefire in place since August. This Friday, the UN announced that the renewed fighting had forced 235,000 people to flee in just 2 weeks. The Syrian opposition has now called for a reaction from the international community.
Today, these areas have become disaster areas. We declare them disaster areas and they should be dealt with accordingly. This should not exempt the international community, regional countries, and the guarantors countries of continuing to carry out all of their responsibilities in order to reach not a short-term truce because they do not last, but to reach a comprehensive ceasefire.
The Idlib region has about 3 million inhabitants. Almost half are internally displaced from other regions already recaptured by Damascus.
Russia has deployed its first nuclear-capable missile that military officials claim can fly at 27 times the speed of sound. President Vladimir Putin boasted that the avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicle could penetrate current and future missile defence systems, and says it means the West and other countries are now playing catch-up with Russia. Well, for more on that, I can speak now to Cyril Bret, an associate professor at Sciences Po University here in Paris and an expert in international relations. He joins me on the phone now. Cyril, tell us more about this new hypersonic missile and what makes it so special.
Thank you very much for your invitation. It's the avant-garde test is one of the many Christmas postcards sent by President Putin at the end of the year. It's a breakthrough from a technological point of view because it's very speedy, as you said. It's possible to make its trajectory vary at the very last moment of.
Unfortunately, we seem to be having a few technical problems there, so I'll have to leave that for now and move on to our next story, which is that a suicide car bomb attack has left 7 soldiers dead in Burkina Faso. It's been claimed by the Islamic State group in West Africa. A separate attack on the same day that killed 35 civilians, most of them women, hasn't been claimed. The death toll is one of the highest in the country since jihadist violence erupted there 5 years ago. Camille Nedelec has more now on the struggle to contain the growing threat in the Sahel region.
Tuesday's attack in Burkina Faso has been claimed by the West African branch of the Islamic State group. One of its jihadists launched a suicide car bomb attack inside the base of Arbinda in the north of the country, killing 7 soldiers. In what looked like to be a double attack, as dozens of fighters on motorbikes killed 35 civilians the same day in the same town. Most were women. But it did not confirm if it was responsible for the second attack, the worst in 5 years, a sign of the growing influence of the Islamic State group in the region.
The north of Burkina Faso had been a target for a while, as the terror group uses a catastrophic situation for the locals to their advantage.
In the past few years, there's been an uptick of jihadist violence in the Sahel region, as the Islamic State group has gained ground in the west and south of Mali, where its borders meet those of Niger and Burkina Faso. On the 10th of December, 71 soldiers were killed in an attack on a military base at Inates in Niger. Jihadists also claimed responsibility for the crash of 2 helicopters in Mali, which killed 13 French soldiers in November. Thousands of them are in the area as part of Operation Barkhane, designed to help beat back the threat. The Sahel G5 is calling for an international UN coalition to cope, as US President Donald Trump is considering withdrawing American troops from Niger.
Here in France, there's no end in sight for the crippling strikes across the country that have cast rather a shadow over Christmas celebrations. The head of a hardline French trade union has vowed to press on with the walkouts. The stoppages are now in their 4th week and becoming the longest-lasting such action since the 1980s. The strikes against President Macron's pension reforms have seen most of the Paris metro shut down and only a fraction of intercity trains running. Here's more.
Are France's railway workers getting tired of their lengthy strike against the pensions reform? Pay cuts they've had to endure for not working have forced some to suspend their action. But protesters say it's only temporary.
Turnout is high. My colleagues and I are still determined. I believe the movement is not waning at all.
Losing money won't stop me from striking. My family supports me. They want me to go straight to the end.
Officially, the number of railway workers on strike was down to 8.5% on Friday. But the figure that matters most is the number of striking drivers. They're the ones crippling transports. More than 85% of them were on strike when the protest kicked off. That number is now down to 38%. But unions say that doesn't mean the protest is losing steam.
Everyone has taken part in the strike, some every day, others have gone back to work temporarily, but they are ready to resume their action.
The number of workers on strike is also lower because many are on vacation.
I'm one of those who have had a planned holiday. I'm officially on vacation until January 1st, but on January 2nd, I'll be on strike.
Unions have already set the date for their next major protest, January 9th, hoping it will be as crippling as possible, another push to remove the reform.
Staying in France, and the government here can go ahead with plans to trawl social media to detect tax avoidance. That's the ruling of France's Constitutional Court. Human rights groups and the French Data Protection Authority had expressed concern over the moves. Customs and tax officials will be allowed to review users' profiles, posts and pictures for evidence of undisclosed income. The new rules are part of a broader law on tax changes passed last week. 18 MPs have been arrested as chaos broke out in Montenegro's parliament over a freedom of religion law. The law, which went through in the early hours of Friday, could enable the state to claim ownership of hundreds of religious buildings. But it sparked protests across the Balkan Republic. Pro-Serb opposition MPs tried to disrupt the vote, and bottles were even hurled in the chamber. Here's more on that.
Pandemonium. Chaos engulfed Montenegro's assembly in the early hours of Friday morning, just before Parliament adopted a contested law on religious rights. 22 people were arrested by plainclothes police, including 17 members of the opposition, some charging to the front of the chamber in attempts to prevent the vote. The law requires religious Montenegrin communities to prove ownership over property from before the country lost its independence in 1918. Opponents fear a lack of proof will result in the church losing scores of artifacts, monasteries and temples, many dating from the Middle Ages.
Do they want to open a tender for the hand of Saint John the Baptist? What do they want to do? Who will profit from all this? As it was the case with any investment here. All our shrines are becoming objects of trade.
The vote followed a day of nationwide protests in both countries, with the Serbian government accused of not protecting its own Orthodox parish in Montenegro. A separate Montenegrin church is still not recognized, with 7 out of 10 Montenegrins still loyal to the Serbian Orthodox Church. Officials in Montenegro meanwhile deny the church will lose its property, saying the law merely aims to sort out ownership rights.
The law will strengthen our effort to build Montenegro as a free and democratic society that will secure all the rights for the faithful, but those rights cannot endanger the rights of non-believers.
Montenegrin President Milo Đukanović has previously accused the Serbian Orthodox Church of promoting pro-Serb policies, seeking to undermine the country's statehood since it split from much larger Serbia in 2006.
In Hawaii, the remains of 6 people have been found after a helicopter crashed on the island of Kauai. The helicopter was carrying 2 families on a tour of the island when it crashed at the top of a mountain. Officials said there are no indications of survivors and that a search for the last person yet to be recovered would be resumed. Now, this year marks the 130th anniversary of Charlie Chaplin's birth, one of the most popular entertainers in the world. His work continues to draw in younger and older audiences alike. But he wasn't just a famous comedian and an actor and a director, of course. Did you know he was also a talented composer and even won an Oscar for his music? Well, an exhibition in Paris is paying tribute to his musical talent.
Charlie Chaplin fans all have their favorite movie sequences.
When he was drunk and fell down the stairs.
When he plays a worker who can't keep up with his machine, it's one of my favorite scenes.
And those sequences, so beautifully written and played, are also crafted through music. Chaplin, the writer, director, and actor, started out as a child dancer. He learned music on his own. Not knowing how to read notes, he still composed the music to his movies. It all started when sound was introduced to film.
The character of the tramp is musical. When you see him moving around, you can feel the music. You can't think of Chaplin's work without music, the music he composed.
Chaplin used music to make a statement, criticize society, poverty, all the way to war and fascism. Chaplin's exceptional talent for music was hailed by his day's greatest musicians, and in 1973 he was awarded an Oscar for his compositions 4 years before passing away.
It never gets old, does it? And if you're in Paris, you can see that exhibition at the Philharmonie de Paris Concert Hall until the end of January. That's all from me. Plenty more still to come on France 24. Do stay with us. Bye-bye.